Hello and welcome to today's episode of Owning Your Menopause. I'm really super excited for today's guest. She is the founder of Get Me Back, a transformative fitness program dedicated to helping women reclaim their strength and confidence after breast cancer. With a deep understanding of the physical and emotional challenges faced during recovery, she specialises in empowering women to rebuild their fitness through strength training and tailored exercise programs. Drawing from her own experiences and expertise in coaching, she combines compassionate guidance with evidence-based practices to create safe, supportive, and inspiring environments for women in post-treatment recovery. Her work focuses not only on physical rehabilitation, but also on fostering resilience, self-belief, and a renewed sense of purpose. Today's guest is Sarah Newman. I am so excited to get you on the podcast because not only are you that incredible woman that I have just described, you have just sort of collaborated with Owning Your Menopause to offer your program for for people who have gone through breast cancer, your rehabilitation program, which is a phenomenal addition to the app. So welcome and thank you.
Thank you. What an introduction, Kate. Thanks very much.
It's always good to have a good intro because it just kind of goes, yes, it's going to be a great conversation, which it is. And I think the best place to start is really going back to the beginning and asking you to share your story behind Get Me Back and what inspired you to focus on helping women rebuild fitness after breast cancer.
Of course. So Get Me Back was born actually after my own cancer diagnosis in 2018. So I wasn't a personal trainer before that. I had a job in London working in PR, and I was always a big fitness fanatic. And when my diagnosis came in 2018, it immediately makes you feel completely out of control because your world is turned upside down. And I was diagnosed with cervical cancer, so I had a gynecological cancer, and I didn't know what to do when I received this diagnosis. I was relatively fit at the time, so I thought that would put me in good stead. But all of this information was thrown at me and I felt so out of control that in those first few weeks around your diagnosis and around when your treatment starts, exercise was what I turned to immediately for my mental health. So I carried on moving, mainly running, I think, during that time, and it made me feel mentally more stable. And then as things started to kick in with treatment, I really did feel quite unwell, and not knowing what I know now, I decided that exercise had to take a bit of a back seat. But then later on through the journey, once the kind of major active treatment had finished, I started to feel physically a little bit more well and decided that I wanted to build exercise back into my routine. And by that point, I'd lost probably a lot of muscle mass. I mean, you kind of imagine when you have cancer that you lose loads of weight and you become this really thin person, but actually I'd put on quite a lot of weight and I'd lost so much muscle mass. So I could physically see areas of my body that had become so much more wobbly as a result of chemotherapy, the steroids that they've put me on. And so I started with really gentle yoga, and I even struggled to hold my own body weight up. It was quite to really see how much that treatment had impacted me physically in such a short period of time. So I slowly worked through just some really home basic workouts practices in yoga, and started to feel actually a bit more solid through my body and mentally a bit more stable because the breath work in yoga was so important. So that I then took it to kind of a next stage. I'd gone for a walk with some friends one day and seen this amazing woman that was running exercise classes on the top of the hill near me, looking down on the valley. I was like, that is where I want to be. So I joined her class, and that was when it was a real wake-up call as to how much muscle I'd lost, because she did a bit of pad work at the beginning with boxing gloves, and I couldn't even hold up the pads for more than about 2 minutes. So I was like, gosh, I really have lost so much. And I kept going each week, and I was quite tired afterwards, but I just felt so empowered by it. And as the weeks went on, I was able to hold those pads up a little bit longer, so I could see I was improving. And fast forward, I thought there must be someone out there who can help train people like me who have had a diagnosis and we're not really sure what we're doing is safe and what I should be doing to make things better for me. And I looked into it, and actually to become a personal trainer was fairly straightforward, but actually taking that extra level of qualification to become a cancer and exercise specialist was something that I could definitely do. So I had a bit of time on my hands on my sick leave, and I decided to push forward with it and do that training. It was all online. So I sat and I studied for 3 months, became a personal trainer, always with the intention to support people with cancer. And Get Me Back was born in May the following year. So I did all my training on the job for the cancer and exercise side of things. And by the end of that second year, I was fully qualified and working with people with cancer.
Amazing. It's amazing how adversity in life drives you to doing something, because I think as much as obviously having that cancer diagnosis has rocked your world, it's given you this amazing new career and the ability to help other women. Because like you're saying, someone who has that diagnosis, I don't know from personal experience, obviously it must be, like you say, terrifying. Obviously, as usual, I always go off script. So I know you may well have seen some of the questions, but I like to just go here and go there. Because I think one of the really crucial points of you kind of joining this community and the community that you have yourself created is exactly kind of, as you said at the beginning, there was no guidance. So you had this diagnosis and it was like, what next and what does that look like? And as you're saying, you were quite fit. You came from a good level of fitness. And the last thing you then felt like doing was fitness through chemotherapy. The women who perhaps have no understanding of the benefits of exercise when they get their diagnosis, and then they're not given, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe that you're given any guidance at that point, either to what to do when you're physically feeling like coming back, or indeed as you're going through chemotherapy.
I think more and more people are understanding the benefits. There are some real advocates for exercise out there in the oncology world, and some of the consultants are proactively recommending it, but it tends to be for people that are asking advice about it. And as you said, Kate, there is no specific advice provided. So if someone says, can I exercise? They say yes or no in some cases, but they don't tell you what to do. And I think that's where the big barrier is there's no kind of guidance to empower these people to go out and feel confident in moving. So, if I was a runner and my consultant said, yeah, you can do some exercise, but at what level and for how long? And, should I be monitoring my heart rate? All of those types of questions people have. And then that brings that extra barrier again. And then they get scared and decide, actually, I'll just go for a walk instead, or I'll stay at home in some cases. So I think there needs to be a little bit more confidence in the exercise prescription. And yes, that will be different from person to person, but everybody can go out in most cases and go for a walk every single day. There are certain strength-based exercises that we can all do, and at different levels, at different intensities, that will help maintain a lot of muscle mass that we lose through our treatment. So I think a little very simple amount of guidance provided by the oncology team would be really helpful at empowering people to keep moving. Also in the knowledge that that's going to help them with their side effects. That fatigue that I experienced, the nausea during my chemotherapy, actually I might have been able to overcome that with a basic level of exercise. So knowing that exercise can benefit me as a medicine almost to manage some of those side effects would have driven me to move more in that period where I felt so unwell.
Yeah. You mentioned that you obviously had a diagnosis of ovarian cancer. Your
cervical cancer.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Your program is for anyone going through cancer, but specifically you have focused on breast cancer because, and I'll let you come into it because again, you're the expert. But what were the biggest challenges you faced in creating that program specifically tailored to women recovering from breast cancer?
So when I started out, I was seeing lots of different types of cancer coming to me, but breast cancer was predominantly the most prevalent and is generally. So I wanted to make sure that I was equipped with the right level of understanding of the treatment and then how it would impact movement because it's such a complex disease. So I went on and did an extra qualification to train me in breast cancer rehabilitation. So that's the reason that I specialise in that area. Also, from a personal point of view, it kind of is slightly detached from my own personal experience. Working in cancer is always a little bit challenging, especially when you've had it yourself, because there are lots of triggers out there generally. And I find it really interesting working in the breast cancer area because of the complexity of movement patterns and the changes that happen during different treatment stages for different people. So I was kind of fascinated more in this area than anything. So I did my training, and then I thought, actually, I could create a program here for people who were recovering from treatment. And it's difficult to design a program that is appropriate for everybody at all different stages of their journey in recovery. Some might have finished 2 years ago, some 2 weeks, but also that everybody's got a different level of mobility and everyone's got a different level of fitness or past history of fitness. So considering all of those factors, I put together this program. It started with a live session so I could see people, and then I gave people a bit of homework to do each week. So that's how the program initiated. It was a 6-week program. There were 10 people that took part each time, and we'd go through a series of topics. And each program sold out. And I thought, actually, to get to more people here, I could record this whole program so that people could do it within their own time and work their way through it. And that's how the breast cancer rehab program developed, and what it is now hopefully available on the platform in the next few days, because it tries to take into all of those factors into account. It tries to consider limited mobility. It considers things like lymphedema. So some may have developed a swelling in their affected side as a result of removal of some of their lymphatic system. It considers people who might have had a reconstruction from different areas of their body. So when people have mastectomies or they have certain areas of their breast removed, sometimes it's reconstructed from areas of their stomach, from their inner thigh, sometimes even not so much now, but in their back. So we need to factor in all of those things. And so trying to kind of almost design it in a situation where someone's had all of those things happen to them and then working backwards. So making sure that it feels inclusive. And I knew already that the people that were participating in the work that I did generally had a bit of a fitness background. They were aged between anywhere from 25 to 65, maybe somewhere outside of that as well. But these were the forgotten people, the people that were just kind of told to get back to life. There's a lot of support for young people, and there's a lot of support probably in the older age category where it's more chair-based exercise. But there was nothing in the middle for people who were active, people who were functioning, had children, had grandchildren, who needed to be able to move well. So that is kind of the level that it's created at, and bearing in mind all of those different adaptations that we need to consider for someone who's had a variety of different treatments for their breast cancer.
Yeah, I mean, amazing. It is incredible. And I think also to that end, because like you, obviously being in this sort of the age and the community that we're in, there are a lot of people, going through menopause. Obviously that, they're plunged into menopause via their treatments, chemotherapy, and that obviously has an impact on the way that they're exercising, and as you've pointed out earlier, their muscle mass. Just as a question, and just sort of thinking about it, because I get asked a lot by women who have had hysterectomies, when can I exercise again and how can I exercise? And I always find that quite unbelievable that actually they're asking us when they can exercise, because obviously you're hoping they've had the all clear. And I know that you are really adamant about making sure that obviously people, before they embark on an exercise program, whether that is after a hysterectomy, let's say, because it's worth mentioning that, the program that you have got could be possibly for someone in an entry level if they've had the all clear as well, from a hysterectomy. My beginner's course could offer the same. It would not be breast cancer specific, just to obviously put that out there. We do 5 mini planks possibly and push-ups, and again, it's just people being mindful. But I think that's the one thing I'm really excited about us collaborating on this, is that we're giving women access to an entry point and also access to a progressive point, because I think that's always the thing that keeps people there. It keeps it sustainable and it makes it achievable. And I think that's really important for people that have had that. I mean, let's come on to that, because both you and I bang that drum on strength training. Why is it particularly important for women who are coming back from breast cancer?
So we, as you mentioned, Kate, at the point of going through breast cancer, many women will have experienced some symptoms of menopause as a result of chemotherapy, but then quite severe menopause symptoms if they're then with a hormone-driven cancer. So many breast cancers are driven by estrogen and progesterone. They're given almost kind of blockers of those hormones to stop them circulating in their body. So their levels are so low that their menopausal symptoms are quite extreme. So they're experiencing quite bad joint pain. They need to be a little bit more careful with their bones because of the lack of estrogen. So they need to make sure they're strength training to improve their bone density. But also, if they've been through treatment like chemotherapy or like radiotherapy even, their muscle mass has reduced if they haven't been exercising during their treatment, which many are not able to. And it's really important to strength train to rebuild that muscle mass, because that will help for all of those reasons around your joint pain, building support around your joints, but also building support and bone density, reducing the risk of osteoporosis. One of the other reasons that probably is similar to menopause, but from a chemo brain point of view, so cognition and general functioning of the brain, you can really improve that with strength training, particularly because your muscle mass is really linked to your cognition. So making sure that you have a decent amount of muscle mass so that your processing is happening effectively. But also future-proofing your body. You know, we do bang that drum a lot. But if you're plunged into menopause at age 40 and suddenly overnight you feel like a 90-year-old, it's a real wake-up call that we need to do something about it and make sure that we are moving effectively so that we, you know, for the rest of our lives, which hopefully are going to be long, you're able to do those functional movements like climb the stairs, pick things off the floor. It's shocking how these treatments can impact women and their ability to do such easy things we think is so straightforward, like, you know, getting out of bed. Some of them can't even stand up because their ankles are so sore. So, you know, just trying to break them in gently, get everything moving at the beginning of the day, and then continue moving through a bit of a strength routine so that stiffness just becomes a little bit less. So it's kind of the same reasons for menopause, but with a few extra additions and considering the really low levels of hormones that they've got, so the symptoms are even worse.
Yeah, and they're often sort of plunged into it as well, not like those of us that might be going through a steady perimenopause.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, it's not steady, but exactly that. They've one day they've got all their hormones and the next they haven't, so it's a massive shock to the body. What are some of the common misconceptions about exercise during or after cancer treatment?
So during treatment, I think major misconceptions around rest is best. I remember my mum saying to me, "Oh, you can't go outside, Sarah, you shouldn't be doing that, you should be resting." And to a certain extent, you do need rest, you do need sleep, you need time to recover, but you also need to be moving, even through your treatment. A bit like medicine, exercise is used on a dose-dependent basis. So the dose for you, Kate, might be different to me. On a day that I have treatment or the first week of my cycle, it might be different to the second week of my chemotherapy cycle. It might be different to my second week of my cycle. But I have to listen to my body, and I have to use exercise as a tool to help me manage my energy levels, my fatigue, my nausea, my joint pain. If it's at a level that's working, those symptoms should be less. If you've done too much, they will be worse. So it's a little bit of trial and error to try and get that dose right. It's all about logging how you're feeling that day, how bad out of 10 maybe your joint pain is. And then you can look back on your next cycle of chemotherapy, for example, and say, actually, in week 1, I was particularly tired and I only went for a 5-minute walk. So I'll do that again today because I know that made me feel better. But in week 2, I was able to do 15 minutes and that made me feel really energized. So keeping a log of that is really important because it will help you design your program across your cycles of chemotherapy, of treatment. For those people who have had surgery and radiotherapy where you've had lymph nodes removed in your upper limbs, there's a real misconception around weight training. There's a fear more than anything that you are going to cause lymphedema if you weight train. There are some guidelines that we need to follow to make sure we're reducing the risk of lymphedema. And bear in mind, some people will go on to develop lymphedema and there's nothing that we can necessarily do to stop that happening. But as exercise professionals, we consider the more risky based moves and we try and mitigate that by not doing those types of exercises or building them up gently and slowly and progressively.
What are those type of exercises?
So, lifting too much weight too soon. So even if you lifted a certain amount of weight pre-cancer, you have to go backwards and build back up to it. So that's a nice gentle progression with weight training. We avoid long static holds, so where you're putting a lot of pressure through your affected limbs, like a plank for example, or too much weight through a press up and holding that for an extended period. We're talking minute plus. We need to build back up to that, but we need to be really cautious. So knowing the signs of lymphedema, a change in feeling tends to be like a heaviness in the breast, in the arm. It does go on to then perhaps swell and get larger. You might notice your clothes getting a bit tighter, and being really aware of what it was the day before that you might have done that could have led to that feeling. Just being cautious and noting down any of those feelings are really important. So that's the fear around lymphedema, but actually strength training is almost acting a bit like a pump. So when we're moving our limbs, we are pumping the lymphatic fluid, as we would the blood, around the body. So it is recommended, and the research now suggests that it's even beneficial for people who have existing lymphedema. So we encourage everyone to wear their compression garments if they do have lymphedema during exercise, but that actually gentle progression of strength training is really beneficial.
Yeah. What advice do you give to someone who might be listening to this who is feeling intimidated at the idea of starting strength training?
Yeah, I think strength training can sound quite scary. I'm sure you've experienced that as well, Kate. But what I try and do is give people the confidence that actually they're doing these things every single day. They get in and out of a chair, they pick things off the floor, they push doors, they pull doors. All of those simple exercises are the basis of strength training. So it's just teaching people the right form and how to then incorporate that into a workout, knowing that it's going to benefit them for not only their joints and their bones, but also the research now is showing that exercise can reduce the risk of your cancer coming back. That's not to say it won't come back, but it says that those people who are more active are less likely to get a recurrence of their cancer.
How do you measure success or progress for the women you work with? Because I think like me, you know, and obviously again it's a very different demographic in terms of, you know, women who have had cancer. I don't like it to be a weight related thing, which I think for a lot of women, I think probably regardless of a cancer diagnosis, it might be the thing where they haven't been able to exercise, they want to come back to it, you know, they've put on weight perhaps because they have sort of fallen off exercising. How do you measure success with those women who perhaps have come to you? You know, I know that, as I say, there'll be lots of other driving factors for them. But yeah, what would you say would be that sort of, what should they be looking for? How are they progressing?
So I think we need to take things back and remember why we're exercising. So all of those reasons we talked about in terms of joint strength, bone density, muscle mass, we've always got to remember that a lot of people have used exercise for aesthetics before, for weight loss, and it's a really difficult mindset to get out of. And I know, having put on so much weight during my own treatment, how difficult and frustrating it can feel. But actually, exercise needs to be a long-term tool that is part of our life toolkit, part of our daily routine. And so it's about refocusing the reasons that we exercise. So looking at things that perhaps you're not able to do and thinking about which one of those things is most important. And that's the thing that I would normally then focus with somebody on for the first few weeks or months of a program. If, you know, they're struggling to get up the stairs because their knees hurt so much, then that's quite major. So I want to then help them get up those stairs better. If people are feeling joint pain, we want to measure that pain each day, work out whether we can reduce it through an exercise mainly strength-based routine. In a group setting, we have like a benchmark workout. So we do some of the basic strength moves with weight, and every 6 weeks we reassess. People have a tracker, they know how much weight they're lifting. We talk about progression of weight because I want people to feel confident that they can add weight into their strength training program, because that's where they start to see progress. And also, particularly in breast cancer, where there are issues with mobility. So making sure that we are looking and reassessing their range of motion across the weeks and months to see whether the combination of flexibility and mobility exercises alongside strength is helping them to regain mobility or regain posture that they might have lost as a result of kind of protecting their surgery site or the area that they've had impacted by their treatment. So there are lots of different ways you can do it, and fatigue is another big measure. People feeling so tired, and actually exercise oncology and cancer-related fatigue are two things that are most researched. So even though it feels very counterintuitive to exercise when you feel so tired, if the dose is correct, it can actually be a really, really useful tool to reducing that level of fatigue. So if you're scoring it on a week-by-week basis and your fatigue levels are getting less and less, that's a really good measure of progress of your exercise program.
What feedback from clients has been particularly meaningful or inspiring to you?
I love hearing from clients. I love getting photos as well. I have a lady who I train who's in France, and she sends me pictures of her out in vineyards in front of Mont Ventoux, and I love getting that. But I do also get emails and have calls with people that describe what has happened during that 6 weeks as being transformative for their lives. And I think that just for me is outstanding, because if I can transform someone's life so that they don't feel like that horrible 90-year-old that I described at the beginning when they're only in their 40s or 50s, that's a major, major change for them. And I think a good justification of how successful the programs are is I've had people training with me for 4 or 5 years now, sticking to that, starting with that breast cancer program and then continuing through my live strength classes, and they're still here because strength training has become part of their life and part of their routine, and it was never something they even considered before their diagnosis. And if somebody can fall in love with strength training after feeling quite fearful about it at the beginning and not really knowing what they were getting themselves in for, that for me is really testament to how impactful it can be done in the right way.
I love that. It's quite it's an emotional question, I think, when you're working with women across the board really who have had such a setback, and they are at the bottom, to know that you have helped them come back. So you are brilliant. How do you think the medical community, because obviously, I think this is the key to where so much of this lies, in supporting women, the medical community can better support women in integrating fitness into their recovery plans?
I think trying to get it as a message before, during and after treatment is so important. So the fitter someone is when they come into their treatment, the faster their recovery. You're going to get them out of hospital sooner, and they're going to be back up on their feet moving faster. So that's a particularly important point to start to introduce it at, even before they start their surgery or chemotherapy. During treatment, actually encouraging people to get outside and move. There were some hospitals who had exercise bikes, even just for their feet, in their chemotherapy suites. So having people almost moving while they're having their chemo rather than sitting in a chair, and encouraging people to get outside with friends, with family members, and to walk, whether it's just around the garden, will be beneficial for them, even when they're feeling a little bit, not so great. I think the medical community needs to be a little bit more aligned. Like any kind of long-term disease in the UK, there's a lot of disparities in treatment and in care across the different trusts. I think being aware of what is out there. So, this is why I do so much awareness raising, because I want people to not only be aware of my things, but everybody else that's involved in the community. Try and create such a collaborative approach as exercise professionals, as a group of physiotherapists, radiotherapists who all try and come together and raise awareness of movement. So making sure people are talking to each other, I think that's a key thing within the NHS anyway, but there are lots of different things happening across the country within the NHS trusts that will help improve exercise through cancer care, but it just needs to be a little bit more joined up.
Oh yeah. To anyone listening, what could anyone who has a friend or family member, how can they support a loved one's fitness journey after?
So I think when you meet up with somebody who is feeling okay, encourage them to get outside, take them for a walk and a coffee, go with them. They'll feel a little bit more supported. I used to do a lot of walk and talks with friends when I was starting to feel a bit better after my treatment, and that was great. It would get me outside in the fresh air and I'd be socialising. So encouraging those who are going through their treatment to get outside if they feel up to it, walking with them, supporting them is really important. But also I do get contacted by family members who are looking for exercise professionals to support their loved ones during treatment. So any research that you can do for them, I think, is really helpful, because your brain is not working when you're feeling so unwell. So having someone do that for you is a really helpful thing, and I can signpost to local people. I can help advise on local groups that might be supporting, but any kind of research you can do on their behalf, I think, is helpful.
Amazing, thank you. I'm going to ask you one last question, and then I'm going to make sure you give us all your handles, all your bits and bobs of where we can find you. What's the one piece of advice you'd give to a woman who's just finished treatment and wants to reclaim her strength and fitness?
Oh, it's a great one. I think I've got two things. One of them is just believe that your body is capable of doing it, and trust in your body, because I think that's one thing that we do lose so much of during cancer is trust in our body. And actually, I think that's what I try and show women, is that you are capable of doing so much more than you think you are, but sometimes it's mind over matter, and it takes a bit of time to re-establish that connection with your body, but exercise is such an important tool to do that. And the other thing to do is just not compare yourself with your pre-cancer self. It's a really, really hard one to get your head around, and I'm not suggesting you can not be as fit or as strong as you were pre-cancer, but you need to forget the personal bests, the running times, all of that, because we have to treat our body with respect now. It's been through so much that has impacted your body beyond what you can probably understand or comprehend. 6 years on, I'm still learning, but we have to treat it differently. We might need to adapt our exercise routines. We might need to take up different type of exercise or sport that we've been doing before, but we just need to respect our bodies and listen to them carefully about what they're telling us. So not comparing yourself to your pre-cancer self, and just listening to what your body's telling you is so important after cancer.
Sarah, thank you so much, as I said back in the beginning, for collaborating, and I'm really excited to see what our communities can do together. Where can people find you?
So my website is www.getmeback.uk, and I'm on Instagram and on Facebook at Get Me Back UK, using the same handle on YouTube as well, where you might find some free workouts.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time this morning. I hope to see you very, very soon. And I'm excited for what the future holds for Get Me Back.
Thank you, Kate.